Critical hit. Track hit. We didn't penetrate their armor. We didn't penetrate their armor. The antenna is damaged. We can only talk locally.
Hey guys, and welcome! This is World of Tanks, How Not to Strategy. I'm Enigmius, and today we're taking a look at some of the basics. How to work the map. New players, we get in the game, we learn how to steer, and how to move forward, and how to shoot things. It's all a lot of fun, but eventually we get to a point where we start looking at maps and saying, okay, where am I going and why? You can see what happens regarding that thought process just by looking at the position of your teammates in any public match map and finding how many have taken up sniper positions within spitting distance of their own base circle. We're going to take a look at that a little bit later. Now, to illustrate what we're talking about more easily, these two young ladies have graciously agreed to help us out, and the first thing they suggested is that we use an actual map from the game to illustrate the concepts that we're going to be talking about, so that's exactly what we're going to do. And I think they just suggested it so that they could go for a coffee break, because now they're gone. Now this is the Lakeville map, which I've fought on a number of times, and I chose it because it's pretty easy to see the different routes that a person can take on this map depending on where they spawn. As far as I know, there might be some instances of the map where there's 2 spawn locations for each team. I'm not 100% on that, so rather than, dick around with it, we're just going to pretend like there's 1 spawn location for each team. So one of them, we're going to pretend it's ours for this example, is up here. And the other one, the enemy location is down there. Conveniently color-coded for better understanding, I hope. Now, just looking at the map, you can get a pretty good idea of what the 3 different lanes are for getting from your base to the enemy base, depending on exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish. Now, the first one is this one here, that kind of starts here and meanders down here and puts us kind of at the enemy base. This is a really, really interesting kind of lane because you can't really tell when you're looking at it from the in-game map because it's so tiny in the corner of your screen like that, but you've got a raised section here that can serve as cover and obscuring vision and things of that nature for your team. And then here you've also got another raised section that the enemy team can use for the same purpose. You've also got little indents here in the hills that teams can use for ambushes and more cover and things of that nature. It looks like there's another raised section kind of here and another indent here for ambushes. So it's not a clean, straight line, which is good. It would be pretty awful if it was. The difficulty is it's not very large. So if you get a lot of tanks passing through here and the enemy puts up a kind of opposition, you can find it very, very clustered and very, very claustrophobic in an awful hurry. There's few things more frustrating than getting blown up because you're trying to move in a particular direction but you can't, because a friendly tank came up and parked himself right on your ass and now you can't move. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine, so I avoid this lane at all costs because it's just, especially with public groups, this is where you find out very quickly how unable people are to think of anything that's going on other than what's directly in front of them, even if what is directly in front of them is a friendly tank trying to reverse.
didn't even scratch them. Critical, we're done for. Everyone get out.
So the second option that you don't see used generally for large groups fighting is this one down here, which is basically the scouting lane. It tends to be used a lot by light tanks, sometimes medium tanks, sometimes tank destroyers. Occasionally you'll see a heavy in here who's more or less just running a little bit of support for his scout, because whoever controls this little S in here basically has access to the center of the map for spotting enemy tanks and relaying it to their teammates via radio. The situational awareness benefit is definitely present. Supporting your artillery by scouting targets for them is huge. If you're feeling ballsy as a scout, this is kind of where you're probably going to want to end up at some point, is in the middle, because you're able to see a lot and a lot more than other areas on the map. So this is sort of the scouting lane, but like I say, you don't generally see swarms of tanks moving their way along this expecting a fight, because that's just suicide.
We didn't even scratch them. Critical hit. Critical, bail out. This vehicle has had it.
The third option, and the one that I usually take in a heavy tank, is over here somewhere, and then through the middle and around this way. Now, obviously, you're not expecting to go from your base all the way around this way, unhindered, unimpeded, because usually you're going to end up in a fight somewhere in here that, for a heavy tank, it has everything that I feel that I need in order to prolong my life long enough to do damage. First of all, we've got all these buildings in here that have walls, of course, because that's what buildings are made out of, where you can find cover. One of the things as a heavy tank you learn very quickly is that artillery love to shoot at you. So if you can find cover behind buildings, behind fences, behind anything, rocks, other tanks, it's a good thing to have access to. And also, you don't necessarily want to be the heavy tank sitting out in the middle of nowhere while 5 enemy tanks are shooting at you. It's just bad for business. So ample access to cover is kind of a big deal. Additionally, assuming you win this fight here and you're able to push through, enemy artillery tends to be lined up down here and along in here. Sometimes kind of in here where things start going south, they can kind of find better cover up in here for a little while, but mostly it's along here in the trees, wherever they can find it, kind of in here, and the tree and tree. The idea is that they get that full access to as much of the map as possible that's limited only by their gun range and the cover that enemy tanks are finding. So if they've got a scout positioned in here who's doing a good job of scouting sort of this area in here, they're probably going to get some guys in there and a little bit along here. Anybody who's moving along the water and all along here. If they've spotted any friendly snipers in here. These are your guys. I'm using the wrong color, but you get the idea. This guy is relaying information back to the artillery so that the artillery can shoot. As someone who plays artillery from time to time, there are a few things more frustrating than being ready to shoot and having nothing to shoot because nobody in your team will advance far enough to engage the enemy, and no one on the enemy team will advance far enough to engage your team. It's a very odd sort of place to be, and it makes you kind of wonder how anything would ever happen if it weren't for the people who take the initiative to charge forward. I'm not saying just charge blindly, that's another episode. So with that in mind, let's sort of take a look at what often happens with the public groups that you find yourself in. And when I first started playing, I did this as well. I'm not ashamed to have done it because there's a learning curve where we're allowed to make silly mistakes. But the match starts and all of your guys are in here around the base hanging out. And then about 45 to 60 seconds later, here's your team. They're all up. We got there, and of course your artillery are going to be back here. That's very normal. That's a good place for artillery. And then you've got guys like this, and they've taken up positions, and they think they're being strategic. They're trying to be strategic. Maybe you've got a couple of guys in and around here that are just ready, because when the enemy comes over that hill in the valley, they're just bang, death. Trouble is, if the enemy team does that, you end up with something that looks like this. You got the enemy, he's ready on the lake, the snipers, and he's got his artillery, right? They're lined up in the back, where artillery are you know, usually pretty useful. And then you've got the guy who's hiding behind the building, because he's going to be shooting up here. The first guy who comes around the corner, and then there's going to be some guys here, and this guy here, he's ready. He's going to ambush the hell out of anyone who comes down here. And then like that. Right? And that's the enemy team. Anybody see a problem with this picture? Nobody can see someone to shoot at. Nobody's moving forward. And the trouble with that is, let's say the enemy, this one guy here, he's finally sick and damn tired of waiting for his team to lead. So he decides to go for a little run, and he comes up here all by his lonesome because no one will move with him, and he all blam, 4 guys shooting at him, plus the artillery because he's spotted by this guy. Now he's mad, and probably if he's smart, 5 seconds later he's back in his garage, because sitting in a blown up tank mad is not a constructive place to be. But it's one of those frustrations that you have when you're trying to push forward. There's a risk associated. Right? Bob says, every time I push forward, I get blown up. I'd rather sit back here where I'm not blown up and not doing anything than get blown up, because that means I did something wrong. Sometimes it happens that you're advancing forward and you're doing the best you can, and the first shot that hit you tracks you, and then the 3 Invisi tanks that you couldn't see finish the job before your track is repaired. It happens. It's part of the process. The difficulty is that this represents a team that's too afraid to take the challenge, and the people who end up trying to do what's necessary to win can't succeed because no one's at their back. So that's why we look at a map in terms of where are we going. Notice we didn't look at, with the exception of the artillery, we didn't look at where do we camp. Because people will find that on their own. We don't need to tell them. They will find a bush to hide in. I actually had a guy shoot at me in a match. He shot twice because the first one missed. He hit me with the second one. He was mad at me because I accidentally rammed him, because I wasn't expecting to find a light tank camped in a bush so close to our circle, and I wasn't watching where I was going. It was my fault for ramming him, but then he treats it like it was this massive affront, and he starts shooting at me because he's a light tank camping right there. Okay, whatever. So let's try to put this all together in a way that makes sense. You're starting out, brand new map, brand new match. You've got 3 options. If you're a scout type, you might want to try this option here. Take up a position in the centrally located scouting area, understanding that the enemy is going to try and do the same thing, and there's going to be conflict, and that's the name of the game, is conflict. You've got the option to go around this way, which is a scouting option as well. If you don't like the central option, if it's too high profile, if you want to do a little bit more of the sneaky bit, that's perfectly reasonable for a scout. You can come down here and either try and contribute to the scrum that's going on as the enemy forces collide, or kind of sneak around. Scouting is scouting, and you don't always have to do the conventional in their face with the turret kind of reaction. Scouting down here, I'm gonna go on ahead and say very, very risky. Be prepared to run, because it's again, it's very, very cramped, and if the enemy has sent any sizable number of tanks through here, there's no room to go around them. You either go through them or you go back, and through them, usually if you're a scout, maybe not an option. Now if you're in a heavier tank and you're wanting to get involved in the fighting, you can take this route here, the quick route to the enemy base. If you're successful here, you aren't likely to find too much opposition to your capping attempts down here. Bearing in mind, of course, enemy artillery over here is going to start having a field day with you as soon as you come around this corner, and they will need to be taken out if you want to actually have a chance of capping, because being over here in an SPG, being able to drop fire on a base like that with spotted enemies is delicious fun for artillery, I can tell you from experience. And the last option is to come around here. Again, it's my favorite because it has everything that a growing tank needs. There's conflict, there's cover, there's protection from artillery, there's ample opportunity to fight guys, there's room to maneuver around your own tanks, you can flank, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff, which is why I like it. Now, I'm not trying to say this is the best way. It's not about declaring the best way and then everyone has to do it that way. It's about understanding which way is which and what some of the pros and cons are. Looking at this map, you can see very, very quickly, this is a very tiny route. This is a larger route, but it's still constricted and it's got a fast route to the base, just like this one. This is more wide open with cover, so it's going to take you longer to get there, but for me, it has strategic value and it's going to be a lot more fun than definitely trying to send a heavy tank down this way with enemy artillery beating the crap out of you. So that's the map review, just kind of taking a look at it, and you might say, okay, well, you showed me this map and I don't feel any better equipped to decide exactly where I should be going, and that's good, because the idea is that depending on the tank that you're driving, the route that you take is going to change. If you're in a heavy tank, if you're in a medium tank with good guns, you might take one route. If you're in a scout, artillery, blah, 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 you might take another route or another position. The main thing is thinking in terms of movement. In terms of movement instead of where do I go to hide? Because the where do I go to hide idea is what ruins games. It's what loses games. Because you put yourself in a position where the enemy is going to spot you and only you, and then every enemy that's nearby is going to go after you, and one by one, the enemy picks off the campers on their way to your base, if they have any ambition or initiative at all. The only way camping en masse works is if the other team does exactly the same thing, and then you're not playing a tank game, you're playing a let's examine the scenery game because there's nothing to shoot at. Leave your comments and feedback below. If you haven't played World of Tanks and you would like to, there's a link in the information section below the video. You follow that to sign up for your free account. Download the client, play the game for free, enjoy the hell out of it. Not only will you be supporting World of Tanks and playing a great game, you'll be supporting my channel. If you want to be notified when I add the next video, you can subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Enigmaeus1, on Google+, Enigmaeus1. Thanks for watching, everyone, and take care.